so now we're back. And I think, all right, cool. The cameras are live. All right, so I am Sherry Shish of Powered by Quilting, and this is month 6 of the Wish block of the month. That is this block of the month right here. We have, ta-da! All right, so that's the quilt that we're making right here. And this is month 6. So this is the 6-month block of the month. And so this is the last month that we are going to be making blocks for the quilt. Next month, we will be making the full quilt top assembly for the block. All right. And this is month 6, which is right here. It's this block right here. We're going to make 4 of them, and they're located at the cardinal directions of this quilt. So if you're looking at the full quilt itself, the problem is the quilt is fairly large. It's 72 by 84. So if I open this up for you, it's too big for me to show you, right? So here you go. You have one at the top, you have one on the bottom, and then you have one on either side, okay? So there's 4 total of this quilt block in this quilt. And you are going to be using a couple different colors of fabric for this quilt. All right. You are going to be using fabric B, fabric C, and fabric E. And one of the things that I want to make sure that you are noticing during this block is that you are going to have a couple things that are cut in quarters and cut in half. And you got to make sure which ones you're cutting and which ones you're not cutting. That's all I'm going to say about there. Make sure you're reading the pattern. So we are going to be making our modified hourglasses first. So I'm going to actually show you guys what that looks like. Okay. And I believe this is what that final block is going to look like. I'm just using my pieces that I cut in these locations, and we're going to make something that looks like that. Okay. And the reason why we're not making a half square triangles first and then making modified hourglass blocks is because if you do that the traditional way, right, where you're going to make 2 at a time, what happens is this section will be mirrored. And for this block, we want all of them the same. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to take these 2 pieces right sides together, like so, and we're going to sew down the seam that they're going. I typically like to have the machine, go through the machine on the right angle portion. So I'm going to send it through the machine this way versus this little angled tip. All right. So we're going to go ahead and do that. Right sides together. The right angle goes through the machine first. And one of the things that I'll also mention in this case is that because you've cut these in quarter square triangles, you want to be a little bit careful on pushing and pulling the fabric as the diagonal is on the bias, and essentially it's a little stretchy. So you want to make sure that you're not going to do anything funky with that. So once we have that pressed open, we need to add our little triangle, and you'll want to align that point of the triangle somewhere on the sewn line. Okay, so center that triangle, and then the raw edges align each other. Now it's okay if these don't fit 100%. We're going to be trimming these down, and like so. Again, bias edges, be careful as this is going through your machine that you're not pushing or pulling the fabric at all. So if you press it open, you have your modified square or triangle, modified hourglass square, whatever. Okay. So there's 2 ways that you can trim this up. The first way is to use the clearly slotted trimmers, which I have somewhere right here. You'll need trimmer A. You'll use that center seam line that you do for the center part of that ruler with the size that you want. This is very similar to how we normally would trim our hourglass blocks or our modified hourglass blocks, the traditional way, 2 at a time. Okay, so we do that. Okay, So we trim off our dog ears and everything is hunky-dory, like so. The second way, if you don't have these clearly slotted trimmers and you can't get them, I actually do think I have maybe like one set left on my shop. But other than that, if you don't have them, I made a couple extra. So I'm going to go press this first before trimming. And the way you'll want to do this trimming is you will want a ruler that is larger than the finished size of this square. Okay? And so I'm going to use my 6.5 inch ruler because that's what I have. And I'm going to essentially align my diagonal line with the large diagonal and then make sure that the points of where my piece is supposed to go, right, fit that intersection point of the size that I want. Trim up 2 sides, rotate 180, and trim up the other 2 sides. Okay, so there you have it. And you will need 4 of these blocks. So I've made 4. Okay, ta-da, magic. The other thing that you're going to need to do is you're going to need to make some half square triangles out of a background and fabric E. Okay, so we're going to make this the traditional method, meaning you're going to do right sides together and sew a 1/4 inch on either side of the diagonal. Now, if you have your clearly perfect angles, like I've mentioned in previous streams, that's the thing, the lines that you see on the bed of my machine. You don't have to draw this line. This, for my machine, is just like small enough or big enough, I guess, where I can still maybe see just the end. Now, if your machine bed is smaller, what you'll want to do is take a pen and draw a diagonal line on either side, okay? Or diagonal to diagonal, corner to corner on either side. There we go. And then you're going to sew either side of the line a 1/4 inch. Okay. Now I'm going to show you how to trim it both ways. The first way using the clearly slotted trimmers, and the second way if you use a normal ruler that is larger than this, okay? I like flipping this with the dark side up, just a little bit easier for me to see my stitch line. I'm going to match my stitch line to my ruler. Cut the dog ears. And then I'm going to go press this. Now again, if you don't have your clearly slotted trimmers and you need to use a normal square ruler to trim it, go ahead and press your pieces first. The difference is that you're going to have to cut all 4 sides and trim all 4 sides. The reason why I like the clearly slotted trimmers is you cut 2 in the dog ears and you're done. Whereas when you're trimming after you press, you got 4 sides of your block that you need to be trimming. All right. So this is the one with the clearly slotted trimmers. This is the one I'm going to trim up with my square ruler. I'm going to align that center line with the center line of my piece. Make sure that it is larger than the piece that I need to be cutting. So I trim up both sides. Rotate 180 to then trim up the other 2 sides. Okay. There you have it. Oops. Didn't cut this all the way. There you have it. And for this block, you are also going to need 4 of them, so I've made a couple extra. And then you'll need the smaller background for the center. Now, you're making 4 of these, that's why we have some extras. Once you finish making all 4 of the pieces for your 4 blocks, we'll do the block assembly. And you're probably like, Sherry, what are these? You have some bigger rectangles, and this is needed for your quilt top assembly. So I'm not going to do anything with this just yet. If you notice in the pattern here, or the image, these two blocks, like the west and east of month 6, don't have any solid pieces around it. But the ones up top, there's this like white section to the left and right of both of those pieces. In the quilt top assembly, that's where you'll use the large background rectangles. So now I'm going to get a design board here. I'm going to show you how I lay this out. Actually, I don't think I'm going to use it. I'm going to just use this one. Okay. So we have our 4 half square triangles that we're going to lay out in the corners. And then we have these guys. Okay. Where, oops, goes this way. Looks like so. So this is what our block is going to look like. And because this is in a grid format, what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew column 1 to column 2, or column 2 to column 1. Then add column 3, press, and then sew the long seams together to finish out that block. So I'm going to put this together. It's essentially web piecing everything together. And I'm going to sew this together. And the best thing about web piecing is that you are not going to go and like cut any of the chain piecing thread in between the blocks. And the reason for that is that you don't want to lose your units as you are sewing them together. Essentially, you're going to be adding the next column to this, and everything is just webbed together, held together by the little small threads from the chain piecing. And that way, when it's all said and done, once you have everything webbed together, before you even sew the long seams together, if you were to step away or walk away from your machine or need to take a break, all of your units are kind of attached and you won't have anything that goes the wrong direction or goes the wrong way, or you lose a piece somewhere. So I tend to web piece absolutely everything I can, as long as it's in a grid. So now that we have this web together, it looks like this. Ta-da! And now we're going to press our blocks in alternating directions, or our units, right? So that once we have these pressed, we can go ahead and sew our whole block together. Like so, ta-da! Those little sections on here. And now I'm going to sew these together on the long edges. A little chain piecing thread here. You can pin your seams if you would like. I use fork pins to pin on either side of the seam. I find with chain piecing and web piecing these, there really isn't that far for any of the pieces to go, so I align it, I get to the next seam allowance here where I stop and then align my next blocks. So, and then now I'll open it and sew the other side. Pretty much I only sew one unit at a time, or one quadrant, or one grid to the next like seam allowance, because I can hold that together. This is what I do to not pin everywhere. But I'm holding that seam. I pause when I get there. I next make sure that my seams work for the next little section right here. Going. Now if my seams are really large or really long, I can't do this. But for these smaller units, I find that it's much faster just to hold the seams. All right, so here's the block. I'm gonna go ahead and press these flat. But this is month 6, y'all. You have 4 of these to make and to catch up on all of the other blocks from the previous months. Okay, so you'll be making 4 of these beautiful blocks here, and that will be the end of the block assemblies for Wish. Quilt top assembly for Wish, I'm looking at the calendar because I don't remember, is going to be on July 20th. So July 20th at noon, we'll be here again on YouTube Live to sew together all of the blocks to make the final quilt top for Wish. So I hope to see you then. And then right now we're going to cut stream and we're going to go live on Love Letter month 3. I'll see you soon. Happy sewing!